Hello, welcome back. Today's episode is all about boundaries. This has been a huge soul lesson for me in this lifetime, and I have learned a lot along the way. As you grow and heal, you will start to hold stronger boundaries. It will happen naturally, but it may be a little bumpy along the way as you recognize that there's some weak boundaries, but perhaps you don't feel worthy of the stronger boundaries, or you're still learning how to set and hold boundaries, and you're still calibrating to attracting people who are a match for your stronger boundaries. There might be some bumps and bruises along the way, some trial and error, and that's perfect and wonderful, because what a beautiful way to learn. The more that you heal, the easier it will get to hold stronger boundaries, because you're just no longer willing to tolerate certain things. When your self-talk is unkind, when you don't love yourself, you don't value yourself, you don't feel worthy, then the bar is pretty low for the treatment that you will expect and tolerate from other people, because they just have to be around there or a little better and it will feel fine. Whereas when your self-talk improves, once you've healed enough to feel worthy, to feel self-love, where you feel like you love yourself and your self-talk is kinder, doesn't have to be perfect, but once you are thinking about yourself, speaking about yourself, feeling about yourself in more positive ways, then toxic or negative relationships or interactions or treatments will no longer be tolerable. It doesn't feel good. It's below the line of where you have your set point of how you feel when you're alone. And if they make you feel worse, you're going to be like, peace, I'm out. This is not working for me. And so when you get to that point where you feel like you're vibrating out of relationships that have been toxic or where people have been treating you poorly, then you might have a conversation, not from a triggered place, but just a communication where you say, when you make comments about my body, when you make negative comments about my body or make fun of my intelligence or my singing voice or whatever your thing is, then you will communicate. When you do that, that hurts me, that makes me feel bad, and I request that you stop that. And if you continue, then I will no longer be willing to spend time with you. Then hold to that. So you will not be communicating from a triggered place. You will not be like a toddler stomping their feet like, no, this is not okay. It will be a calm, non-reactive. You might have emotions and that's okay, but just a calm place. And then they either adjust and recalibrate or they no longer fit for you. You walk away. Your boundaries and your confidence and self-worth will be so strong that it will no longer resonate in your field and it will no longer continue to happen. So when you first start to set boundaries, if you have historically had weak, poor, crappy boundaries, the people that have benefited from your lack of boundaries will likely be upset. The people that you let walk all over you, the people that you let treat you poorly, whatever way they benefited, once you start to hold stronger boundaries, they will either they might get upset, they might get triggered, and they'll either adjust or they'll just fall away. The relationship will dissolve and disintegrate. And that's actually what happened in my marriage. As I healed more and felt worthy and loved myself, I was no longer willing to be in that dynamic. And it can be a co-created dynamic for sure. As I started holding boundaries, then things started to just not work anymore. And then sometimes if you, for example, start holding or hold a boundary with a client that, for example, a cancellation policy or something like that. Like, okay, last minute cancellations. I require 24 or 48 hours or however long notice for cancellations, otherwise you'll be charged, or something like that. And if they're someone who has poor boundaries and they bend themselves to appease other people, then they'll likely be pretty triggered that you're holding a boundary with them, because they'll be like, I put myself last, so why are you putting yourself, like valuing yourself? You should be putting yourself last too, so that you appease me. And that's kind of like a little bump that you might experience, but it will shift as you attract different people. And one thing that is key to note is it is not just about setting the boundary. You also have to hold the boundary. So if you tell your partner, for example, or your friend, that you are no longer willing to tolerate them insulting your weight, making comments about your weight, and they do it anyway. So you have a conversation, you're like, I set the boundary, and then a week later they make a comment that upsets you. This is the key point, where it doesn't mean you have to end the relationship after like one transgression. They might have some like adjusting, and there might be some bumping and growing along the way, but you have to hold the boundary. You don't just let it slide under the rug and get mad. You have to hold it, because if they learn that you say you have the boundary, but you'll let them do it anyway, this could be for washing the dishes at home or putting your clothes in the hamper or whatever it is. And of course, pick your battles. But if they learn that you communicate it, but then you let them do it anyway, then they're just going to keep doing it anyway. So you have to hold the boundary. And the energy behind the boundary is also super important, because I mentioned earlier, if you're doing it from the energy of a toddler throwing a tantrum and stomping their feet, which you may feel that way, but release in that way in private on your own or with a coach. But the communication with the person, where you're communicating the boundary, needs to be from a calmer energy, where you're not feeling triggered, and where you feel you're just having a communication. You're not stomping your feet. And even the communication is important, but also just how you're feeling, So if you are feeling triggered, do the work to look at, okay, why is this triggering me? Where does this come from? How else in my life have I experienced people pushing this boundary? Where else have I felt this way? Where else have I felt disrespected or ignored or not valued or made fun of, or whatever it is? Like, tune into what you're feeling and then reflect, where have I felt this before? When have I felt this before? And then do your own inner healing. And as you heal that, then the energy behind holding the boundary is going to be more of a confident and worthy energy, rather than a tantrumy, whiny energy. So if your boundaries are unclear, and you'll have different areas, you'll have boundaries for clients, you'll have boundaries for friendships, for partners, and all the different areas that you interact with those people, or your kids, or your parents, or if you are dating, or everything. So you'll have many different areas of boundaries, and what is it that you are available for? So if your boundaries are unclear, you will attract experiences to show you where your boundaries need clarity and strengthening. So when you find that your boundaries are being tested and pushed, this is a clue to you that you need to clarify your boundaries. So take the time to self-reflect. You can sit and journal, or you can go on a nature walk and just ponder, however resonates for you to spend the time in inquiry. But ponder and decide, what am I available for? And hold firm to that. Do the inner work and healing to clear any triggers around it, and to feel worthy of those boundaries, worthy of your new standard. Because if you're tolerating something It's very likely there's something there. There's a reason you're tolerating it. So do the inner work. And once you are clear and strong in your boundaries and you feel worthy of them, your energetic field will then only attract those that are a match for your new boundaries, for your stronger boundaries. So for example, in the beginning of my business, I attracted clients who were a match for my weak, poor boundaries. As I healed, as I grew in my self-worth, as I felt worthy of stronger boundaries, I started attracting clients that valued my time more, that honored my boundaries. So it's an inside job. It's not their fault. It's not something they're doing. It's not something that just keeps happening because that's how the world is. It's happening to give you information of what you're vibrating at, of what you are a match for. Not because you're only worthy of it, but because you believe you're worthy of it. You're worthy of everything. You're worthy of infinite, all of your desires. But do you believe it? So do the inner work, do the self-reflection, self-inquiry, work with a coach or healer if that is available to you and resonates for you. Highly recommend that, because the coach can see what you can't see, because the life we're living, the lens we're seeing life through is it's the lens we see through, and we don't recognize our blind spots. So a coach can see that and be like, hey, here's this, you've experienced this with this other person a couple months ago. There's something here where, and can guide you toward the healing of it and the growth from it. So I would love to hear how this resonated. I would love to hear how your journey has been with boundaries. Is there an area that you find your boundaries are weak or unclear? Take a screenshot and share on social media and tag me, and you can comment. And if you feel drawn to my energy, I am, of course, available for private coaching, and I can help you heal and strengthen your boundaries as well, or whatever else is alive for you in your life.